We promised some secrets today. We're going to let you in on some of our secrets. I think the first thing is if you have been involved with us here at Pride for any length of time, it's probably no secret that we don't advocate for fundraiser events a lot, right? So I want to start with that disclaimer. We know that your return on investment of time is better spent doing other things oftentimes, but we also acknowledge and recognize the fact that there is a place and a piece for fundraiser events, and that regardless of if we tell you not to do them, most people are going to do some. So if you're going to do them, let's do them right, right? With that, I want to hand it over to Jake to share the first couple of secrets with you.
All right. So secret number one, transition slide, drum roll. The anticipation is killing me. There we go. Secret number one is there. Okay, got it on screen. Fundraiser or fundraising events should not be your overall funding strategy. And we started with this one because it seems like it's the most obvious, but more than half of nonprofits, this is their overall fundraising strategy. Maybe there's some grants thrown in there, but for the most part, when we come into new programs, particularly, what is their strategy? Oh, we have 6 events this year. We run them. This one does 10,000. This one does 12. This one does 30. This one usually loses us money, but there's a lot of people there. And we kind of go down the list. And this is the overall fundraising strategies. We're going to do events every couple of months to try to get people to engage with us and know us. And instead of asking for money from people, we'll try to, coax them in with activities or galas or 5Ks or whatever that we have, so that they'll hopefully show up, and then maybe they'll spend additional money while they're there. And that's kind of what we do. We're event planners. We know that this is not the most equitable fundraising strategy that we can do, but we just want to acknowledge that if you're over half of nonprofits that do this, you're not alone. This is not something that you should be ashamed for trying, because most people believe that this is what they should be doing to raise the max amount of dollars. We're here to give you some alternatives. And of course, if you're still going to do these events, how to kind of integrate it with an overall better diversified overall philanthropy portfolio. So there's a ton of studies from Blackbaud, from Bloomberg, just a bunch of companies that track great fundraising data that have generally these averages every year. The new data comes out every May or June or so. We should be getting the numbers from 2022 pretty shortly here. But this is almost always where these two key statistics land. Through a special event, it's about 2-to-1 ROI. If you're better than that, you might do a little better than that. If you're not super savvy with how to set it up, it might be a little worse than that. I do want to also acknowledge 9 times out of 10, this does not include staff salaries. So if this takes you 3 months to set up an event, your salary over those 3 months is not factored in to the overall plan, overall program from that event, and also the overall gross revenue versus net revenue. So we'd say, oh, we can't stop this event. We gross, $18,000. It's like, well, what are your expenses for the event? Oh, they're only about $5,000 or $6,000. It's very profitable for us. It's definitely worth doing and spending that time. It's like, okay, well, even if you're making $5,000 a month as an employee, that's $15,000 plus benefits or whatever else that your charity or your employer is paying to pay you to set the whole thing up. So now your expenses are $21,000, and you're actually literally losing money on the event. So though you could get a 2-to-1 ROI when we factor in staff time, and we're not even talking about lost opportunity costs of going and meeting with donors as well. But we want to be careful that this is not our fundraising strategy, because we can't spend half the money that we're actually using to set up the event in the first place. Our recommendation, of course, is to shift the primary fundraising strategy, not to say to eliminate events entirely if you don't want to, but the primary fundraising strategy to major gifts only. And what we mean by that is sitting down one-on-one or in small groups of people, like if it's a family or spouses or a corporation foundation, and asking for large gifts. Now, we define major gifts starting at $50,000 and up, pledged over a period of a few years. For some nonprofits, that's even smaller, sometimes 25, even really tiny nonprofits, maybe even 10,000. But generally 50,000 is when major or naming level gifts start. The average, even if you don't even optimize this, is a 5-to-1 or a 10-to-1 ROI. So it's 10 to 20 cents on the dollar at the absolute most. We want our clients, of course, to be in that 5 cents on the dollar range for major gifts, and that's what we aim for, of course. But even if you're doing the basics for major gift fundraising, for campaign style fundraising, you know you're going to be in that 10 to 20 cents range spent to raise a dollar. And that includes your staff time. That includes the time it takes you to go take that donor out to lunch, pay for lunch, maybe print some materials with their name on the side of the building. You're trying to get them to name whatever it may be. But the ROI is substantially better, substantially different. So shifting some of these over so that your entire strategy isn't just special gifts with a few asks put in, but instead it's the opposite. Your entire strategy is, of course, major gifts, which is a way better ROI with a few events, sparsed in if you feel like you need it. Some lessons from this. The main takeaway here is a fundraising strategy that prioritizes major gifts, signature gifts, will yield a significantly higher ROI no matter what the event is, no matter how hard you work. So if you incorporate fundraiser events as part of your overall fundraising strategy, that's fine. But proper planning about the event and actually trying to get out of that 1-to-2 ratio a little bit is kind of our next big strategy that we'll talk about. So though we know that the top performing programs in this country do 0 fundraising events, if you're going to do 1 or 2, here's some things to optimize and kind of get you out of that 50 cents spent plus staff time plus staff salary to raise that dollar. Which leads me to secret number 2, which of course is if you choose to host a fundraising event, be sure to set specific and measurable goals. And you're thinking, well, this is very obvious. Our goal is to raise $16,000. That is not enough information for the event to know if it's been successful. Here's what I mean by that. Before planning an event, we want to set goals by asking a bunch of the following questions and actually go into some more detailed data from that event, before that event and after that event, to actually track the true ROI, not just cash in and cash out. This is the best way to actually qualify. And say you have 6 events and your goal is to get it down to 2. You don't necessarily want to pick just the 2 top grossing events. There are other metrics to track that might even be more important than an additional $4,000 here or $6,000 here to look at your true ROI for your overall program and what you can bring in around the event, after the event, in terms of cultivation or stewardship with your constituency, that kind of thing. So here are the questions when we're kind of auditing a special event that we ask, usually in this order as well. What are you hoping to achieve with this event? If the answer is truly just to raise money, we need to center in and dial in on that to see, is that what is working? Are we spending more than we're bringing in? Are we spending around what we're bringing in? How many staff hours are going into this? What is our paid staff hourly time? Can we factor that into the budget? Because the answer may be actually the event, yes, it raises a little bit of money, or say it gets us $100,000 and we spend 50 or 70, but it's our best cultivation touch point for the year. We invite all of our existing donors there. They all bring a friend and we talk about our mission. We have a very captive audience to talk about what we've accomplished that year. And we found that after the event, we get a bunch of new, Cornerstone Society members or whatever. We get a bunch of new $10,000 pledges from the event afterwards by being able to follow up with these people because they're interacting with this donor base. They hear about our mission, they hear about the wonderful things we're doing, and we're starting that. So if our goal isn't necessarily to raise money, but to, I think the friend raise term is thrown around a lot in the industry. If we're friend raising with this event, that can be okay. Cultivation events, stewardship events have certainly a place in a very well-developed, mature philanthropy program. But just ask yourself that question first, saying, no, this is truly to raise money, because if it is, maybe we can nix it. But no, this is important for our identity, or it's important in terms of getting interfacing time with people that we would never get to normally. We would never be able to talk to these people because they don't take our calls, they won't sit down with us, but they'll come to a gala. Maybe that's worth it. So ask yourself that. The second is, how much do we want to raise? And you can kind of compare that versus the time it would take you to raise that through major gifts. So we want to raise $15,000 with this event. It's only going to take us 6 weeks to raise. How many lunches can you have in 6 weeks that you ask for one time $10,000? Probably a lot. Say you went to 40 lunches in 6 weeks. Do you think one of those people are going to say yes and 39 of you will turn? Hopefully not. Hopefully 39 people don't turn you down. So you can just look at the opportunity cost and saying, if the main reason is we're trying to raise money here, let's take all those hours that I would be calling for sponsors and getting catering and trying to find a venue. It's basically like planning a wedding, it feels like sometimes, and apply them instead into asking donors to sit down with you for lunch, explain your mission, explain your project, and ask for a multi-year pledge. And invite them to come along on your mission with you. Much, much easier, but you do want to ask yourself, what is our financial goal in terms of gross? What is the net? And how does that compare to use the same time against major gifts or something else? The next is your budget. The worst case that we've seen of this is when you get a fundraising event committee saying there's no staff hours. We have an event committee. Our board has 6 people on it who love planning this thing, and they kind of just do what they need to do, and we don't worry about it. And oftentimes that results in a very, very expensive event where you set a budget or you set a budget range. It's like, well, but if we do this catering, it's not, well, we want an open bar too. Well, the event's not gonna be small because we think we're gonna get at least 70 people to come. So we need to find a more expensive place to be. Well, we can't do it on a weeknight and get the discount because no one's going to come unless it's on a Friday. So you kind of begin to stack up. So if you have a budget, make sure that we're being very, very disciplined about sticking to it. Because at the end of the day, it really is about, can we raise this money? Can we get our return on investment back? So before you begin, look at budget both ways. This is money in and money out. We expect to have about this many people. We're going to sell this many auction items. We're going to have people where they can sign up to join our whatever club. We expect to get at least 10 more of those, and kind of budget all these things out and look at your expenses, look at your staff time, and have that detailed budget, both money in and money out, with your kind of your net at the bottom there, and know what that is. The next is, in my opinion, probably the most valuable thing you can do with an event. How many new donors are you going to capture? And then what are you going to do with them once you have them? Saying, well, this is a great base for us in terms of getting people who've never heard about what we do to giving $100 for the first time. Maybe that's not very well worth it. Maybe saying, oh, even if we got 20 people, that's not a few $1,000s, that's not incredible. But afterwards, we now have their contact information, their address, their phone number. We've talked to them a little bit at the party so they know us by name. They've exchanged our business cards, whatever we may do. Now I can go take them out to lunch and ask them for $10,000. And now certainly this event is much more profitable because we have 20 people who are now beautiful prospects for us. And even if we get a third of them to commit to our kind of mid-level range giving, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we wouldn't be able to capture before, because again, we don't have a way to get to these people. So we think about how many new people do we want to come to this event, and what are our strategies for getting them there? Maybe all of your donors who already know you, or your board members, maybe ask them, hey, can you invite at least one guest who's not a donor? We'd love to have more people know about this project we're doing. Can we get some guests on the list? So that, again, we can spend a little time, captive audience, get in front of them, make sure the name of your organization is on the event. Easy mistake to make is we, hold this big gala. It's the gala, the Night Under the Stars is the name of it. But we forget to put our charity's name in the actual title of the event. It's not posted anywhere. So, oh, this is a really fun event. What's this for again? Is this for kids? Is this for cancer? I can't remember that was a really fun party though. We have to be really careful that we're being very specific about our mission. We get time to talk about what we're doing, our projects, what we have coming next, and how many new people are we going to capture, and make sure we have a pipeline afterwards to retarget those people and try to upsell them to our mid-range giving. Tends to be most people who are in the gala attending space in your community probably have the ability to do $5,000, $10,000 over the period of a few years. That's kind of your like upper middle class family, maybe your younger donors, your people in your 40s. Those people tend to be your event attendees when in the kind of gala space, and they often are the same people who can give some amount of money to your program on an ongoing basis. They just have never been asked, and this is the first time you get access to them. The next thing is, can you upsell your existing donors with some sort of a touch point, or to invite everybody who's at the whatever level, the bronze level, if they go up to the silver level tonight, they get invited to this next event that's in December or whatever. What are the things that are actually at the event that encourage people who are already giving, already in your donor database, have given an annual gift at some point? Maybe you get some kind of a nice name tag or badge or ribbon that indicates you're a donor, that people get to stand up and thank them and invite them to go up a level into doing that. Another way to upsell people without actually having to ask is to indicate what their giving level is by their little ribbon or whatever. A lot of times if you do a big fancy ribbon, for the people who are at your top level givers, and then a little tiny ribbon for the people who are at the lower level, people say, well, how do I get the big ribbon? Oh, well, actually, we got pledge forms right over here on the table here. We can get you fixed up. We can get you a big ribbon. We have extras. And people who are competitive, or even just don't want to feel the social shame of I only gave $100 when my friend gave $1,000. You can really capture people and say, oh yeah, everybody who got those ribbons, they're the people who are choosing to upgrade their level tonight. So actually we got a table over here. You can get signed up, and people will and talk themselves into upgrading their giving oftentimes, just because you have that little bit of social pressure. A little bit of social pressure never hurt anybody. The next is, how will you educate those in attendance about your cause? Say you get 10 minutes to do your spiel. We want to make sure that spiel is very dialed in. You're not talking off the cuff. You have a planned something, whether it's a video. You don't have to have a PowerPoint necessarily, but have your little speech on calls to action, which is the next question. What is that call to action? And put some urgency into it. Create a time parameter to it. Hey, we want to accomplish X, Y, and Z specifically by this date. And say by next fall, we want to have raised X amount to do X, Y, Z. The most important thing with this is not to talk about how these funds will help your organization, but talk about how these funds will help the community. We want to make one more connection for them. We know that if we have better IT and a new parking garage, how much that will help our workflow and we can serve more people or whatever. But if we talk about that only, about, oh, we need this and we're so out of date and we're struggling here, what they're thinking about is like, well, I don't really care about you. I really care about the kids or whatever your cause is meant to improve in your community. There's something specific for that. So we want to just make that leap for them. Just cut out the middle part. We don't need to talk about how it helps us. These $10,000 or these $10 million or whatever the amount is being applied to specifically impact the following. Or the status quo right now is this is what's happening. And with this amount of money, this new thing will be what's happening. And we must accomplish this by fall 2024. Really easy, really clear. You don't want to have a long-winded pitch. You can get in and out 5-10 minutes at the most and be very, very specific about what you're trying to get done and what money you need to get it done. And then have that into a call to action and say, and so if you're so moved or so inspired to help us out, or you can give a patient story or someone that you've helped come and talk about their experience or how their life was changed. And if you want to help people just like Jason, here's what we plan to do. There's pledge forms in the back. We'd love to have you join our Cornerstone Society, which is our $10,000 pledge club. You can pay that over 3 years. You get invited to the following events. And as a result, we'll be able to achieve X, Y, and Z mission. So that's probably more in depth than what most nonprofits are thinking about when they're going to the event. They're saying, we're going to have the event. It's a one-off deal. We're going to raise money that night or not. And then it's on its own island. That's all it is. We want to think about this as part of an overall continuum, a pipeline of bringing people into the organization, getting them excited about your mission, teaching them about what you do specifically and how that impacts your community, and then inviting them to kind of walk alongside you in a pledge gift model eventually. So again, this is great cultivation if you can do it right. It doesn't have to be, we're raising $18,000 on this night, and that's the goal for the event. The goal should be, as part of this program, we're capturing new people, we're upselling existing ones, and we're encouraging them to join our upper level giving clubs eventually. All right. Just a couple of key takeaways. By setting clear goals in all of these categories around the dollar amount, other metrics, you can create a specific roadmap for your event. Say, here are the things that are going to happen over the night. Here are the things we're going to do. And here are all the statistics we're going to track. Here's how many donors we have now. Here's how many donors we upsold. Here's how many new entries in our database that we captured. Here's how many of those have attended more than one event. We go down all the lists and we say there's probably 40, 50 metrics that when we do audits for events that we track and say, there's a lot more than just money in and money out that evening or that day for the event that we can say this was successful or not. So again, just to clarify, don't think just about money in, money out. We have 6 events. We want to cut it down to 2. Let's pick our most profitable ones. Your most profitable ones financially aren't necessarily the ones that are big picture wise bringing in the most revenue. So keep that in mind. All right, turning it back to Marty.
Thank you, Jake. Secret number 3. Utilize time savers whenever possible. I know it's shocking, but time savers can help so much, can't they? How many of you have inherited an event that you're doing it because that's the way we've always done it? I picture myself in a hallway, one of my very first fundraiser events. We had this massive silent auction and everything was being done manually. I literally was like sitting down in a hallway, handwriting what everything was. And I'm a very detail-oriented person. So that was not a good task for me to be doing because I was spending far too much time on the details of every single thing that we had been doing because that's the way we've always done it. when I came to learn after a couple of years of experience with an event such as that, that there were time savers available to me that would be just as good, if not better. And so it's important for us to ask, is this the best use of my time in almost every step of the way when we're planning an event? Let's unpack this a little bit. Next slide, please, Trish. Time is money, and prioritizing our time is key to maximizing fundraising revenues. Again, major gifts, you can sit down with someone and make an ask that you could raise in an entire, 6 months of planning for a fundraiser event, just the reality of it. So our staff time that we're spend planning, executing, following up on the event, that's an expense to the event, right? As well as Jake mentioned, the opportunity cost of our staff time not being available to do other times, like major gifts, that is also an expense to the event. So if we are able to have some time savers in there, we are able to cut down on our expenses and thus maximize the net that the event brings to the table, right? So next slide, please, Trish. Let's consider some things that I think are some of the greatest things out there right now for saving on staff time. I'm actually attending a fundraiser event next week. A friend of mine purchased a table. Her husband's business is a sponsor. They purchased the table. I don't know much about the organization. I immediately, after accepting their generous invitation to attend the event with them, I immediately received an email asking me to accept my invitation to this event and to fill out the registration. It was just the online registration. So all my friend had to do was send my name and email address to the organization, and they put in that entry. And now I filled out, my credit card information so I can bid on items at the event. I filled out my mailing address. I filled out a few other, required fields that I was fine filling out, that they didn't have to spend that data entry time in. They didn't have to chase me down. They didn't have to do all of those. So if you're not utilizing online registration and ticketing, that type of thing, to save down on that manual data entry, save time managing the lists that you manage and trying to hunt people down, you are spending far too much time on a task that could be done much more efficiently and effectively. And if you're not capturing that information, you're also missing an opportunity. We'll talk about it in a little foreshadowing to my next secret, but you got to have a plan to do something with it. I've also been involved with organizations where we capture a whole lot of information and then we finish the event and we're like, whoo, moving on to the next thing, and don't do anything with that information. So online registration can put that information in there for you, but you got to do something with it as well. So, but saving in on time for registration and ticketing, there's so many easy ways to do it. Pre-event planning checklist. How many of you are utilizing a checklist and have a roadmap when you're planning an event? I'm not shocked not to see everyone's hands up. So often we're like, we've got a fundraiser event. Maybe we went through a few of the questions that Jake asked just now, but we don't actually, it's kind of all just up in our head swimming, right? If you have a checklist of the things, it's going to keep you on task. You're going to avoid last minute rushes. You're going to make sure that you're delegating out responsibilities if you don't have the time to do it. And you're going to look at it in an organized way. You're going to prioritize the most important task, because guess what? It's just like life. We fill up the time that we have, don't we? And if our top priority right now is this event, we're going to fill up the time. If we're right too close to it and we don't have a checklist where we're planning and that we know what the priorities are, we're going to get in the weeds. We're going to be sitting in the hallway at 10 p.m. handwriting out auction items and the details of them and why that's important, and thinking that that's an important task when really we should have been doing something else. So if we are not utilizing a pre-event planning checklist, we should be doing that. We should take the time and think about what the top priorities are. We should map it out on day-to-day leading up to the event. How long do we need to spend doing these things? Is it essential that the staff does these, or can we utilize volunteers and go from there? Automation tools. When I say automation tools, I'm talking about things like, you're going to do the promotion leading up to the event. You should be planning out your marketing and your invitations like right away. That should be a piece of it. You plug all of that information in and just automate it to go out, right? So you don't have to think, the weeks of the event is 1 week away and we forgot to tell people that we forgot to tell them about all these great auction items that we've been working so hard. We're having a gala, we have these great auction items, and guess what? It took us up until the day before the event to finalize them, and we forgot to tell people about them. So nobody came to the event prepared to purchase an auction item. Whereas if we had all of that laid out and it was automated to talk to us and tell us, 1 month out, this is something that's happening. 1 week out, think about it, and they were teasing us, I would now be prepared and be super excited about how much I might going to be spending on that auction item that you worked so hard to secure. Because the worst thing that can happen if you have an auction or something in one of your events, you spend all this time getting it and nobody bids on it. Right? So if we have automated tools for the promotion and the expectation, we can train our people that are coming on what it is that is going to be important that night. And that's key, right? What do we want them to do when they come? Are they just going to be there? Do we want them to know about our organization and what's going to be happening? We should tell them about it so they know when they're coming what the organization does. We have all that information far in advance. And if we can automate that in leading up to the event, then they're going to be prepared and know why they're there versus I was at that really fun gala and I don't even know who that was, right? Last one on this list, that delegation of responsibilities. I know that delegating is hard for a lot of people. It's extremely difficult when you think you can do it best, you know what to do, your checklist is in your mind. It's going to take a whole lot more time to explain it to someone, all the things. But if you are hosting any sort of fundraiser event, you absolutely must have volunteers involved. Because if you are doing all of the things on your own, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that you are wasting valuable time. You need to utilize them. They can do things like the actual day of the event. They can help set up. They can help check people in. They can help educate people on why they're there. They can help with talking points. They can be our feet on the street. And leading up to the event, if someone says, oh, I know, let's have this event and I think we should have an auction, you can say, we don't have time for an auction. But if you own that, if your time is spent doing that, we can do that. If you delegate that out, you see how serious they are about it, right? If they're going to own it, they might make it successful. If they're not going to own it, you don't need to be doing it, right? Because it's just going to eat at your time and something else that you could do. So lots of ways that we can save time. But the key takeaway here, next slide, please, Trish, is, we've got to work smarter and not harder. We shouldn't be sweating the small stuff. Oftentimes in event planning, and if we're thinking about it, details are important. They are, but not always, right? Some of those small details can suck so much time. So we have to weigh the pros and cons of how detailed we get and what's effective enough, what we delegate out, what our priorities are, all those things, because time spent on details that don't really matter can be better spent on building relationships. So my final secret, number 4, always prioritize relationship building. Any event that you're having, if you do not have this as your number one thing to be thinking about, you are missing the gold mine that exists with events. Next slide, please. The real gold mine, we promise the gold mine that exists, is in connecting with and engaging your supporters in a deeper, more meaningful way, right? People are seeking connections. Somebody who doesn't want to connect with you is not going to show up at an event. So if I'm going to attend your event, I am looking to connect with someone, something, somehow, some way, right? So you've got to find a way to make sure that you are building those relationships. And when you are just one person or a couple of staff people, you can't possibly build all of the relationships needed. So you need to have a strategy to engage your volunteers and have a plan for them to get involved and seek connection and help share your mission, help share what's happening. Because for the most part, no matter how well planned your event is and how much marketing you do, and you try to share what it is that you're about and what your goals are, it's still going to come much better from that individual one-on-one conversation that one of your volunteers, one of your board members had with someone at the event about why it's important to them, right? So they are seeking connections. They are seeking connections with your organization. They are seeking connections with your tribe. They want to be thought of like you. So lean into that. Find every opportunity to build on those relationships and make it a meaningful event for people. If you don't make it fun, people aren't going to show up. So it's got to not only be meaningful, you've got to have the heartstrings, but you do have to look for the fun factor, right? You have to make sure that there's some sort of an entertainment appeal. You want them to have a good time, so they're coming back for more, or they're thinking, when they think of your organization, they're going to think of that event. You have to draw those connections intentionally for them. So think about the fun factor. You don't have to be all things to all people, but have a few wow opportunities to connect with people so that they do have a fun, a meaningful time and a memorable time. We've got to focus on that education and recognition of those people who are already supporting us, right? Recognize your biggest supporters at your event. Make sure that you showcase these people believe in us, and they believe in us in a big way, and we appreciate them in a big way. And make sure that you have the opportunities available for those people who are open and interested in knowing more about your cause. So often we think, oh, well, they're just coming, they really want to have fun, which they do, but we miss the opportunity to tell them who we are and why we're special and meaningful. And we've got to educate them on that through story, through personal interactions, through statistics, whatever it looks like. Have that prevalent around your event as an opportunity to connect with your people. And then last, but oh, definitely not least, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, but I've been guilty of it. You have to have a plan for continuing that relationship cultivation after the event concludes. So often, again, it's like Jake said, it's like you hosted a wedding and you're exhausted. You need to go on the honeymoon afterwards. You don't want to think about that event or all the great contacts you made because you are done. Finito, move on, take a vacation. You got to bend it while it's hot. You have to have a plan to continue that cultivation process while it's still fresh in their mind. It might be that you took photographs at the event. I am a big fan of printing out photographs and handwriting a note. It was so great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Remember how much fun you had here in this picture. To bend it while it's hot. There are ways that you can engage your volunteers, but you have to have a plan, because if you don't have a plan well before that event happens, you're sure not going to come up with a plan afterwards on what you do with all this valuable data you've collected, what you do with all these valuable connections you've made. Have a plan. Do something strategically to cultivate these people, to bring them along so that you can inspire gifts in the future and that they do become a part of your tribe and not just an event attendee. So, in closing, building relationships at your events and after your events can yield those significant returns over time. But again, it requires that plan, that dedicated attention, and resources to execute it. So map that out in your timeline. The week or two after the event is not just the, hey, I'm going to count the money aftermath. It's, what am I going to do with all these new contacts that I made? That is the true gold mine that exists with an event. These new connections we've made, and how are we going to move forward? So last slide, just a recap. The secrets to event fundraising success. Fundraiser events should not be your overall fundraising strategy. If you choose to host one, be sure to set specific, measurable goals. Utilize those time savers wherever possible, and always, always prioritize relationship building. I know we have taken our full time, but really quickly, do we have any questions that we can entertain for the good of the order?